let's examine what we have. The evidence that we have before us is that Nick Clements is no longer with us. Now, he said 5-6 years ago that was going to be the case. You know, he was told he had 2 years to live. 5 years later, it came and got him, bit him eventually in his arse. And what this is about is a recollection of what he was like. Because very quickly we forget who our parents and our grandparents and our friends really were. It's difficult to remember. Actually, you know, what have you got up to? What have you been doing? And also, who's, you know, have to be aware of who's supported me, who's looked after me. You know, Amanda, in that sense, was just a wonderful person to be with. I know she hates it when I use the domesticity of her, you know, but that was what it was about. You know, we were very, in those days, it was still quite misogynistic. And Amanda had determination, had skill, had will, and also was incredibly beautiful. And we had kids, and we had Tom and Anna. And Tom was the Buddha. He'd just sit there with his big belly. And Anna was just so active. I remember making a home video, and you couldn't see what was going on, but you could just hear. And it was Anna's voice going, "Why are you showing him? It shouldn't be about him, it's about me." You know? What I have had is the support and love of the people around me. And in terms of my family, that was it. You know, my little family unit was Manda and 2 kids. And that supported me and sustained me. And, you know, other people, Chris Aid, Sarah, all those kind of people looked after me as well. Maybe there isn't a beginning, but there's a continuation. For me, I actually know who my ancestors are, or relatively well, who they are. And a lot of people just don't. You know, it kind of goes dead after the grandfather or whatever. Whereas I actually know who I've got and the trail of blood behind me. And my mum she was a barmaid, does well, but then went and studied to be an actress. And she went to RADA, and she loved being an actor. And it was just really fascinating how on one side of her family were these full-on Trotskyite, you know, Camden Town, seriously political, macho, you know, kind of, the whole thing was politics, nothing else. And then on the other side was McDonald's, who were you know, from the Highlands, from the Scottish Highlands. You know, her voice would change. So like when she, you know, like, it was just incredible how subtle all these things are. When she was with the McDonald's, she'd suddenly have this incredibly strong Scottish accent. And then, you know, when she was with the Camden lot, she mainly shut up, but had a very different voice. And so, like, you know, that was the main thing, was that my father forbid her from telling people who she was. My dad is very interesting. I hated him. My brother and I hated him. He's a very violent man, and he was an alcoholic, and he would be extremely unbearable. He was the editor of Tribune, which was a newspaper, and high pressure job as ever was. So my dad was this kind of very strange mix of all those things put together. And he was a brilliant carpenter, really brilliant carpenter, but he never got to really do it. And he never really did what he wanted to do. But in the end, he edited Tribune for 25 years. And it only kind of emerged after his death that actually, 1999, my dad was accused by the Russian government of being a major spy in their favour, who was passing on information to the Soviets. And my dad just went, fucking hell, there's one of them trying to put their expenses account up. I have a great grandfather who was the Prime Minister of Britain, the first Labour Prime Minister. So yeah, Ramsay MacDonald is a very, very, very controversial figure, but I'm nothing really. And my mum used to say that he was even more powerful. That what social change he brought about was even more powerful than Obama, in that he was an illegitimate son of a fisherman, couldn't read or write, and became the Prime Minister. He became the Prime Minister because he could woo people, because he could tell a good story, which is fabulous. I love it. And he told lots of good stories. He was an orator, you know, he would speak in front of 20,000 people in the streets of Trioba, you know, and be heard. They had a majority of 2 people when the first time the Labour Party ever got in, they had a majority of 2 seats. Within 2 weeks, 2 people had died. So do you see what I mean? So like it was such a short period of time that they were actually in power. But you see, he tried to compromise with the Liberals, tried to compromise with the Labour Party and the Tories. And of course, the hardline Labour Party people did not like that. You know, that he was seeking to share stuff. Told me also about the games that they would play in number 10 Downing Street, and that they would lick stamps and stick a little sixpence to it, and then flick them at the ceiling, and they'd stick to the ceiling, so the sixpence would be stuck to the ceiling, and nobody would know where it come from, because it was just, suddenly there was these sixpences on the ceiling. My grandmother, from the other side, from my father, was Sonia. Sonia was magnificently wild woman. You know, she was, I guess, born in the teens or early noughts. She smoked 20 fags a day. You know, there's Capstan untipped. Her husband was this incredibly beautiful vegetarian, you know, peace-loving, and she was sitting in the corner. My memory of Sonia is just this smoke-filled corner of every room that she was in, like that, and she'd grab hold of your arm, and she'd go, "Get me," you know, she'd give you 2 and 6, "Get me some Capstan untipped," you know, come on. And I had to go out and find them in Baker Street. He lived on Baker Street. She was incredibly force of nature. And you know, the major story, controversial story from her, was that when Civil War started, she left Harry and the kids and went off with a lover to fight in Spain against the fascists. And then, kind of about 8 months later, she reappeared, and nobody spoke of it. Nobody said a word. She moved straight back in the house and fine. Nothing was said. The Pioneers, as we were called, were one of very few organisations around in Britain who actually enabled children to do art. Basically, at school, I could never understand it, because they say, "Oh, let's do art," and then they go, "Oh, but art is absolutely useless and, you know, no use to anybody, and nobody will ever earn any money from it." And so the whole thing was paradox. The whole thing was contradiction. I wanted to do artwork which is with children and allows those children to do whatever they want to do. In college there was 3 of us, really, 3. There was myself, Chris Partridge and Adrian Butler. And the 3 of us worked together through college and through beyond for about 20 years. And it just worked absolutely wonderfully well, because I made the things happen. I went out and got the money and chatted up people, and then Chris would come in and make sculptures with the kids. Huge numbers of cardboard footballers, etc, etc, etc. And then the third part was Aid. Aid was more of an artist. We worked for many years up the valleys, a huge amount of years up the valleys, and in that we got bored like fuck by cardboard, like by doing all this stuff. So I was asked by Port Talbot Borough Council to come up with a proposal for the Aberravon seafront in Port Talbot, which is 2 miles of grassland by the sea. So the sea comes straight in from New York across, and it comes across the sea and then hits Aberravon seafront. So the conditions were quite wild. We had 12 yacht schemes in those days, youth opportunity schemes. Lads off the Sandfields estate, which was one of the hardest, wildest places in the world at that time. And we just put this proposal in. Phil designed the work for us, which was great. And he was a madman. And we put this project in, which we never thought we'd get, which was for a life-size blue whale and a shoal of dolphins jumping out of the grass, in this amazing kind of thing. And they just looked at it and they go, yeah, okay, we'll have that. And I was thinking, what? Hold on a second, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. How do you make a 70-foot whale? So we taught ourselves along the way, and a lot of the lads, the boys were builders. They were out in work, but they had the building skills. So that was fantastic because we didn't have the building skills at all. And they started to make this 200 ton, for the whale, and there was a submarine, and there was various other things like that. 200 tons, barrowed by hand and onto site. It was just incredible. One of the main things for me, which is really important, is that we were able to work with people in such a way that enabled them to feel at home and comfortable with creativity. The thing was that within that context, the clash of egos amongst artists, on occasions I was employing 10 full-time was immense. It caused a huge amount of friction. We made some of the largest mosaics in Britain, in Europe, and we did unbelievable projects, which were hugely complex, just in the planning, let alone the fucking making of it. Oh, it's Berlin, Schleswigstrasse, can you do a project? Oh yeah, Philadelphia, New Zealand, and India, Jaipur. Yeah. We'd done the whole thing. And I remember this one woman coming up to me and saying, your job is what every one of us wants to have had. Because I got to travel the world, I got to meet all these people, I could do whatever I bloody wanted. It was huge, I suppose. But what was happening was that the whole thing split up as well. That people did different things, so and 15 years working together, it's a long time. And it was really sad. It was really sad, but it was the only way that things were going to last, was if it got taken apart. So I took it apart, and we carried on for another 5-6 years, making murals, doing all this stuff and like that. And then I just thought, what am I doing? I'm knocking these things out. The Pioneers will never be replicated again. It's a completely one-off thing, and I'm very sorry and sad that this is the only documentation of it. Because it was well worth a huge amount of effort and looking at. So I wrote a series of two triptychs, 3 books on creativity, how to use creativity with kids and communities and all that kind of stuff, how to use it well, and then 3 books on masculinity, on bringing up boys and running ceremony and ritual and all that kind of stuff, which is really what I wanted to do, but the Arts Council wouldn't have funded it, so I had to go out and find it again. from another source. And I then got involved in Martin Prechtau and various other people like that who did work for, again, like just unbelievable projects. But this is about rites of passage. I'm running a men's workshop here every month or so. So men come in and work with me for a day. And one of these lads has been working with me for 10, 15 years. And he says, look, Nick, my boy is now no longer a boy, and he wants to become a man, but he doesn't know how to do it. Can you help us? And I said, yeah, okay, we'll do it. We'll do it. And so we said, okay, bring him in. He was about 18, 19. And he came into the next meeting. And you know what 18 and 19-year-olds are like. They're sitting there. And there's all these 60, 70-year-old men who are all really lovely, strong people. And so I'm chundering on about Vision Quest, that you go out into the wilderness and you're on your own for 3 days in Dartmoor. Oh, I did 3 days in Dartmoor, no food, nothing, just middle of nowhere. And then somebody else would go, oh, I did 4 days in Edinburgh. Oh no, I did 2 weeks, and how much did you suffer? And he's a fabulous kid. And he goes, that all sounds very anal. And I suddenly realised, yeah, fucking hell, where's his voice? Oh, we should do this. And so he said, no, I'm a fucking loner. I don't hang out with other people. I hang out with myself. So 3 days hanging out with myself in Dartmoor is fuck all. It's not a challenge at all. That's what I do all the time. Fabulous. So he said, what? So we called it. In the end, we called it the kindness of strangers. So what he did was 3 days. He lived in Bath. No money. Sleeping bag, no phone, nothing to communicate outside the world. All the hippie women, love them, were doing ritual and ceremony, and drums and all this kind of stuff. And I'm looking at the kid and I'm thinking, this is female energy, it's not really what is it. So I grabbed him by the throat and I said, come on, let's go do some play, let's do some stuff. We threw him in my car, blindfolded him, and he's lying on the back seat of my car, and we're going, where's the coppers stop us now? This teenager. And I drove 70, 75 miles an hour, somewhere kind of Bournemouth, out that way. And we bundled him out of the car, and I just so he was in the middle of nowhere. Absolutely didn't know anywhere that he'd been before. And I said, 3 days, come home. Ask for the help of kindness and kindness of strangers. That's it. No more. He quite correctly identified the fact that the first thing that he ever did was throw up because he was so scared of walking back. No taxis, no hitchhiking, nothing like that. Walk. You just do it under your own steam. See and listen. Listen. It's the main thing. So he started back, and me and the mate were in this pub in Salisbury and everything. Shit, he's gonna die. And we're going, why didn't I put a tenner in his back pocket, and all this kind of stuff. And you just think, oh, shite. Because there's a process. There's a process involved in this, which comes from all the work with my ancestors, comes with all of, you see it, it's so beautiful. It comes through to this, the kindness of strangers. And then he's disappeared. His mum and dad are freaking out. And his dad's phoning me every half hour. Is he come back? And I'm going, fuck off. Believe in the process. And then the next, the third morning, he phoned me up. And I said, I'm out, getting home now. And I said, but whatever you do, don't speak to anybody. Wait until we turn up. So the two of us turned up and we listened to him. 6 hours worth of talking about what had happened. He'd been invited to a public speaking lecture at which he gave a talk. He lived one night with homeless people in can't remember, Salisbury, something like that. He slept in other people's houses for the other times. He had 25 quid in his pocket because people kept giving him so much money, and he had to turn food down because he had too much food. And all he did was, people would come up to him and say, "Are you okay, mate?" And he'd go, "Yeah, and then he'd tell the story. He'd tell the story of what he was doing. And the best one was, he's in the pouring rain, hammering it down just outside Glastonbury, really dark and miserable. And this copper turns up in the car, comes up behind him. And so he walks around and the copper goes, "What do you think you're doing?" And he goes, "Well," he said, "Get in." And so the coppers invited him into the car and just sits and talks. And at the end of it, the copper gives him a fiver and says, "Have a good time." That's it. It's like, fuck. That is the theme to it all. Let people make their choices. Let people just support them to make their choices, make things happen. But you see, I couldn't do that kind of work with the Arts Council. They wouldn't have handled that very well. So it's like, that then set off this whole thing for 15 years of doing
coming of age,
ritual, ceremony, all those things. And that was fantastic, amazing. Yeah, and so we ended up working with, I didn't particularly work with him, with a chap called Wallace Black Elk, who, his grandfather was a very famous Native American. And we did sweats and ceremony here in Newport. And it was just, what I got from it was this understanding that, there was me, there was my father, there was my my mother, and they all connected in me, out of me, into the grand ancestors out there, and we were all doing the same job. We were all just doing it well, and it's just fantastic, to know that I was supported in that way. Very few people get that. Most people don't know that kind of information. It's very important. I was invited by a conference in South Wales to give a talk about rites of passage. And there were lots of people interested, lots of people came along. And this one chap came along who ran a charitable trust in Kenya to work with the Samburu tribespeople, who are a nomadic tribe. The people were very dependent on these charities giving them money. And it was the kind of the end of that nomadic, self-sufficient lifestyle that these charities were supposed to be taking, helping the tribespeople. So what was happening was this huge ceremony was taking shape, and 109 boys to be circumcised. Massive. It took 20 years, basically. Every 20 years, they had insufficient resources to do this ceremony. So that's why every 20 years they did the ceremony. And so I made this documentary film. That was what I was asked to do.
Yeah.
And that documentary, it for me, there's a way of working, which is person-centered approach, in that what I said was, I've got the technological equipment and knowledge, whereas they've got the imaginations, and that we'd make the film together. That I'd do what I could do, and they wrote the script to do all this stuff. So they got it. They absolutely got it. And the chap was a bit bonkers, but I thought, well, it's a great thing. And so I just thought, well, I'm sorry, we're doing it. And it's one of those projects where he says, there's loads of money, and then within 3 months, I was doing it for free. It all suddenly changed, and there was no money involved, but I was so heavily committed to the thing, I had to just do it now. He had a friend called Tony, who was an American artist, photographer, and she came with me. She came here, so there's two of us that just went on this thing. It was literally like, oh shit. And it's like, up until that point, it was unreal. You know, oh yeah, I'll go to Kenya. You know, and then I'm in Nairobi airport, you know, with Tony, the two of us kind of looking round, and we're going, bloody hell, mate, this is serious now. And these blokes, they knew Tony, so that was brilliant. And Tony was she's an absolutely lovely, wonderful person. But the process was that they never really told me what was going on, you know, and they took huge delight in, you know, going, well, you don't know where we're going, because, you know, white people had spent all their lives telling them what to do, and here I was, me and Tony, white people, definitely white people, you know, and they could took the piss out of us, something wrong, which was fantastic. And having worked with Indigenous people around the world, I knew the form. Do you see what I mean? Like somebody who hadn't got that experience would have at that point gone home. You know, like it was. We turned up the first night. So the first night on the new place, there's a circle, a fire stick circle. So like this big circle and then a big fire in the middle. Mm-hmm. And only I was allowed in. You know, Tony, woman, not allowed in there. Right. And so I was sitting there, and the elders are looking at me. You know, they're seriously looking at me. You're like, and then this one bloke goes, lovely, very kind, okay, thank you very much, but we don't want this. Go home. And I'm thinking, hold on a sec, I've just travelled 3 million, 3,000 miles. I've spent all my own money, you know, and thank you very much. Go home. Yeah. And I'm just saying, nah, Tony's kind of going, you know, freaking out. And I'm saying, you know, why, you know? And he said, because that man you're working with, you know, this chap, is a madman, you know. And in the end, we realised, yeah, absolutely. And he didn't tell us you were coming. He never told us. And so I'm going, oh, right, you know, which is very typical of this man. And yeah, something, you know, oh yeah, I'll just phone him. Yeah, fuck you, Will. And I was tattooing at that time. I was tattooing my back, doing the animals. And so I just started on a spiel with them, which I said, you know, in your culture, you shed blood. You know, that's the ritual from boy to man, is shed blood. In Wales, we do exactly the same. We put needles in our backs and make ink drawings, blood. And they were, okay, show us the fucking tattoos. So I showed them the tattoos. They said, yeah, great, fantastic. Okay, you can make the film. The day of ceremony, you had the day of circumcision. They were so wired. They hadn't slept for 3 or 4 days, you know.
Leading up to it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because they're so scared. You know, they're absolutely terrified of doing it wrong and then having somebody come and kill you. Yeah. And it's like, and the elders were going, so this kind of thing your culture does then, Nick, for rites of passage, is it? You know, like, I'm going, no. The day is just chaos. Chaos. There's people running all over the place. People with guns, you know, like it's fucking. They then, once having got through that process, were fed milk and blood. So it was this kind of urn thing with yogurt kind of milk, because it was also stale, mixed with blood from the bull. And you know, they loved it. They absolutely loved it, because again, I didn't know what I was doing, and they were watching me. The elders, Nick, did you drink some water this morning? And I said, yeah, some water. He said, how much water did you drink? I said, I don't know, quite a lot. He said, if you drank too much water, the blood will clot in your body and kill you, because it'll swell up so large that your stomach will inflate and you die. Did you drink any water this morning? Yeah, they just love it, that whole kind of, pissing themselves laughing. All of that came together. They then spent another 4 weeks only drinking this formula of milk and blood.
Wow.
And suddenly they're all fucking bodybuilders, they're all bloody hell. And at the final kind of ceremony, they then handed, it was so sexist, they handed over some food to their mother ceremonially and said, this is the last food you will ever need to make for me, because I will always find food for you now.
Yeah.
And the boys, some of them liked it, some of them didn't. Some of them said, well, maybe, And the way that they treated their mothers was awful, really disrespectful. And so I got back to Heathrow Airport. I threw myself onto the tarmac and kissed it, I was doing the Pope, but it's like, fuck, I didn't, certain times during that, I just didn't think I was going to get there. That was the end of my life. But it was so fantastic. We don't understand what it is to be on the edge, because our lives are so cotton wool, we're all so protected. And go to the edge and go to the edge and go to the edge of that. And on some level, I loved it. I absolutely, which came as a big surprise to me because I'm a right wimp. And it's like that, something about being there, and being yourself, really, truly, authentically being yourself. Fantastic. What an opportunity to do that. And if I'd had, guides and, all this rest of it, I would never have experienced that. And it's fantastic to be able to do it. But,